Let's welcome our man, Prince Paul, here.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Wow, I'm so used to like hugging the microphone, right? That's hip hop for you. I should hold it like this, right?
I mean, you're the guy who's producing the stuff, so you should tell us how we should hold it. It's more like...
Got hold like this. That's when you gangster. But Prince Paul wasn't really like, that was given to me because they said my regular name, it was DJ Paul. They said it was a boring, so they didn't want to say DJ Paul on the microphone, so, you know, I'm a humble dude, but I was forced on that whole hip-hop ego thing. I've been DJing since I was my son's age, and that's him right there, that's Paul Jr. Actually a little younger than him. When I was 10 years old, and yeah, I've heard I was the fake Grandmaster Flash of my day. And when you're 10, 11 years old, that's pretty traumatizing, you know. So that's why I'm here today, just to prove to the world that I'm not the fake Grandmaster Flash.
Being the fake Grandmaster Flash, who came up with that name then?
What, the fake Grandmaster Flash? Oh, that was like school, you know, like growing
like
up.
Plug, right?
Huh?
Like Plug.
Yeah, like blow, exactly. Like, for me, DJing started when, like I said, hip-hop. It wasn't called hip-hop when I started. When I was like my son's age, I was 10 years old. And so a lot of, with hip-hop for me, I think is a lot different from what people see out here now. I mean, especially the commercialized side of it. When I was coming up, it was more or less DJing in the park. MCs rarely had anything, any substance to say. It was more like...
So if you're the DJ, it wasn't like that?
What's that again?
Where's the DJ? Hey, I'm the rapper, huh? DJ
Actually, the DJ was the primary focus. That's why he had Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5, Grand Wizard Theodore, you know, and the Fantastic Five. It was always Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. You know, it was like that initially, and that's the era I came from. And like I said, it was a lot different back then. It was all about having fun. You battled people, you know, you did your thing, but it was basically going out and just seeing people dance as you know. As opposed to now, it's just a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different. I think once the money gets involved, it changes a whole lot. But coming from Long Island, it was, well, actually, first time I heard hip-hop was in Brooklyn. And that's when it was actually kind of filtering out from the Bronx down to like all the boroughs. And then what I learned in Brooklyn, I brought to Long Island.
You say you're DJing forever. Can you tell us a little bit about your first record player?
Man, I'll tell you my first record player, you want to get really old school, was a Mickey Mouse record player with the hand that was like the needle you put on it. And I remember being 5 years old, and I just bought Hot Pants. And I bought Hot Pants and Groove Me by King Floyd.
So we just... I mean,
and that's my first turntable.
So you're trying to be really musically correct here. I mean, it takes other people 30 years to come up with that joint, so...
That was my first. But no, my first DJ set was really makeshift because, you know, my family didn't have a lot of money. So what I did was I took a component system.
Hey, I didn't have a Mickey Mouse player. That was pretty...
Hey, man, you know, I earned it, man. I was a good boy. Christmas time. So what I did, I took a component set. And for those who don't know, component sets are, you have your turntable, you have your radio, and 8-track player all in one. So I took the turntable, it was an old one that my family had. I think the radio or something didn't work on it. And I took another like cheap turntable, I think it was a Lafayette, that was the name of it. It was like a little component set that somebody threw out, and I used a balance knob as a mixer to go between the component one and the one that I had. And I put it, for those technical heads, I put everything mono. So instead of balance going left for one turntable, you know, left and right for each turntable, it went through the center, and that's how I kind of mixed. I had no cue. But, you know, I thought it was pretty ingenious for a little kid, you know. I amazed myself and my friends. That's how I became the fake Grandmaster Flash.
Yeah, I mean, the cue system wasn't even invented back then, was it?
Nah, I mean, not that I can remember. You know, I think a lot of the mixers that I remember back then were up and down, no cue, if there was any mixers. Or there was like the big knobs, I think was like the, you know, the mixes that I remember. I mean, man, now looking back, I feel really old because there was a lot of things that wasn't really around back then.
Why is it that everyone seems to have had the same mixer back then?
Because they only made a handful. Like now, since I guess DJing and the whole culture is built up so much, of course there's competition. Just like you have a billion MCs and DJs now, I guess you have a billion mixers because it's catering to that public. I mean, to that demand. So back then, I think there was Newmark, Gemini. There was a company called Clubman. GLI came a little later. I mean, there was like just maybe like 4 or 5 mixers, and Gemini just really came out. And a lot of the mixers were like big pieces of sheet metal with like giant faders like this if you had a fader. Once the crossfader came out, everyone's like, oh my God, he got a crossfader. And you run to the guy's house, ooh, take pictures of it, you know. I mean, things were like such a big deal back then because everything was just so, it was like a mystery, you know, where now, I mean, you know, not to shoot down what's going on now. I don't want to seem like that bitter old school guy, but I think the cool thing was that, like I said, everything, you had to kind of go and search it. So you had to invent your own stuff, or, for example, like I said, now you could go on the internet, which is great. You could look in magazines and kind of see things and read up on people, which is really good. But then, since it was just in its early stages, you had to invent things. And I think that's what really made a lot of things crafty as far as like the equipment. I guess that's the reason why somebody eventually made the cue. I think Grandmaster Flash was kind of credited for making the cue, and you know, a lot of things that's on the mixers now you just didn't have.
When you talk about this age of mystery and when not everything was at your fingertips, so to speak, covering up your records was a big deal. I mean,
yeah.
How anal was that?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, back then, what it is I have to compare then and now so you can really get a gist of what's going on. Now, you know, you have breakbeat records on compilations and it's out there and everybody could buy a ton of records. Back in the day, you had to research and really look for your breakbeats. Like, for example, if you found a record, let's say like Billy Squier's Big Beat, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with that breakbeat. It's like, choom, 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 choom. Now, a lot of times, you know, everybody wasn't just buying those records, you know, like now, maybe a Kool and the Gang record comes, not now, 50 Cent record comes out, everybody buys it. Billy Squier, no B-boys really buying it. So if you found something that was that sacred, you don't want nobody else playing that record. You want everybody to come to you and to your parties to hear those records. So immediately you'd go home and you just erase all the labels. But the thing that would messed a lot of DJs up, and how I kind of got a lot of the breakbeats back then, is they would erase the labels, but they were stupid enough to keep the jackets. So me as a kid, I'd go to the little block parties and stuff, and I watch them, and I look at the record, and I look in the back, and you see the record up like that. Take a little pad. Not that I could afford half those records, but I knew what they were. And this was about the time, who was like looking, me and Bismarck actually. We used to actually go to little parties and stuff and just write down stuff.
Do you still participate in that discipline these days?
As far as like beat collecting, I don't know. It's, you know, the cool thing about it then was the fact that you try to get stuff that nobody had. I think now people fanatically beat collect, and I lost interest in it. I mean, I still try to get things that I don't think people have, but I don't DJ like that anymore, where I kind of go out and like play beats, because people are not apt to listen to new stuff like that anymore. You play something new, they're like, oh, and only like a handful of beat nerds in the front, like, oh, that's incredible. You know what I'm saying? So,
and as we all know, beat nerds are the ones that really get the party going, yeah?
Oh yeah, of course. They're the ones in the front, like, oh, that's great. So, I mean, I don't, even for production, sometimes I don't collect as much, you know. My tastes are obscure anyway, so I kind of have a little different collection than most people.
You just mentioned the kind of big name there, Bismarcky. Can you tell us a little bit about the people coming from Long Island around that time?
Wow. You know, what's amazing is a lot of us, we played together, a lot of us in Long Island, with no ideas of ever making records or working together. I mean, for example, I used to DJ for Bismarck when I was well, he used to call himself Busy Bee back in those days, when I was in 8th grade.
So
8th grade for me is like 14 years old. Used to run into Chuck D and Flavor Flav, which was a little further out from me. Eric and Parrish, who's EPMD, to see them a lot. Rakim, I don't know if you're familiar with Rakim. He's, oh, I'm sorry.
What was Rakim's name back then?
Oh, his name was the Love Kid Wiz. He had a group called the Love Brothers. Yeah. They used to call him Pop. Him, Freddie Fox, whose name used to be Freddie C. This group called the JVC4s. There was a lot of us back then, man. And we used to all like battle each other in little parks and stuff. And you know, records weren't really in, like, you know, it's like so far-fetched. Like, who makes records except, you know, Fat Boys and, you know, Sugar Hill Gang. So we weren't really into it for that. It was just for the competition and for the love of music. And then later on to kind of see, you know, the people you grew up with, you know, like on tours or making records was like totally amazing. It's like, wow, you make records too? You know, it's like, ooh, wow, it's amazing. I remember one time me and Flavor Flav, he used to have this show called the MC DJ Flavor Flav show, and it was out of, I think, Delphi.
So he wasn't, even then, he wasn't too decisive on what it's going to be with him.
Nah, he was doing a little bit of everything. I think it was him and Bill Stephanie and Hank Shockley and all of the whole Bomb Squad crew. They had their own little show, and I remember I went up there, and I remember me and Flav sat down. I think I might even have it on a cassette tape. We sat down, I was like, man, because I just joined Stetsasonic. And he was like, yo, maybe one day we'll go on tour. Ha, 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 ha. How far-fetched is that? Maybe we'll make records. Next thing you know, it's we're on this tour called the Def Jam Tour in 1987, which was LL Cool J headlining, Public Enemy Stetsasonic opening up, Eric B. and Rakim, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Houdini, and in some instances it was Kool Moe Dee, Run DMC, and KRS-One was on a few shows.
So even without trying to sound not too much of an old bore, that's what they still call the golden age of...
Yeah, that's weird. It's
why?
I think a lot of times when people refer to that era as the golden age, it's just because I guess it was a lot of it was just gut. It was a lot less marketing was into it because rap wasn't proven then. So I mean, nobody knew what it was really. What it took to make a gold record. I mean, okay, Curtis Blow came out with the Breaks or Sugar Hill, whatever. Those were just, you know, every once in a while it'd come out. But your whole intent was just to show a new style or something different that you had to offer to the music. And I think out of a lot of that, just a lot of creativity came out because you were just trying to differentiate yourself from everybody else. And I think out of that, it just came out just a total feel. Like I said, it was just organic as opposed to now where, you know, okay, this is a marketing scheme. This is how you're gonna dress. This is how you're gonna look. This hip hop appeals to down south. This hip hop appeals to up north. This appeals overseas. This appeals to whatever. So I think
don't forget about the Dirty South track in there.
Oh yeah, the Dirty South and everything. So I mean, I think as far as like that being the golden era, yeah, I think it's just diversity was the whole thing.
Speaking of diversity, and you just mentioned you've been in Stetsasonic, and as we all know, no, check it out, my man, that's the music of a hip hop band.
Wow,
it was a different concept too. I mean, what would a night like that, what would a lineup like that look like? What were the different live performances? How were people getting, as our man Tim would say, is getting down on stage?
Well, the whole thing back then, you know, it was always just trying to prove yourself. And a lot of times you played to crowds that didn't know your record. So everything was based on your performance. I mean, even before we made records, you know, the whole thing was like, okay, a crowd comes in and everybody wants to, you know, everybody wants to be entertained, and you didn't have the power of the hit record to kind of make it happen for you. So the whole thing is you had to go out there and you had to show the people something. You had to show them that you were talented, or, you know, you had a rhyme skill, that you could DJ a certain way. And I think that really, that was really the whole gist of what the performances were, and that's why a lot of times you hear people when they refer, I guess, to like the early 80s, even late 70s to like the late 80s, why the shows, they're like, oh, the shows were so incredible back then because everybody had to prove themselves. Where I think a lot of times people now kind of base themselves on whatever hit they have.
When you went out of the 5 boroughs, what was it like to go to, I mean, what were the different places you went on a tour? Des Moines, Iowa, or?
Yeah, I mean, the tours back then went everywhere, and I think what was really cool is you had a packaged hip-hop tour as opposed to now. I think what's a little different is that, I guess because of insurance situations and that, I guess, the quote-unquote violence in hip-hop, you had to, now you build maybe, I can't say R. Kelly because he's kind of controversial too. Let's say NSYNC opening, with Nelly opening up, because it's a safe thing. But then I think what was pretty cool is it was entirely hip-hop, and it was everybody kind of coming together. It was underground stuff as well as like the popular stuff. I guess as popular as you could get. LL Cool J was probably the most popular dude then. Well, yeah, it was his tour.
Was he the first one to take his shirt off?
That's a good question. I'm a dude. I wasn't really paying attention. So, I don't know.
So what's this whole thing with hip-hop and homophobia coming to speak of it then?
I don't know. I haven't really dealt with that. You have to ask somebody else. Next question.
I've always been curious because I have the 12-inch of Ghost Stetsa, and on the flip side, On Fire. I didn't see any credit for the scratching, and I'm wondering if you did the cuts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I did. Did I do the scratch? Yeah, I did do the scratching on that.
Dude, that was ahead of its time, man. That's
Thank
like
you.
inspiration. Yeah, dude.
Thank
I
you
mean,
very
that
much.
was it.
Can I say something about me and DJing real quick? People know me, might know, I'm holding the mic like this, right? People know me as a producer, I mean, for the most part, but DJing was always like my first passion. I am a lover of music, not just hip-hop music. Like some people kind of get into like, yo, hip-hop this and hip-hop forever. I don't take hip-hop seriously. You can just tell by my records I don't take it seriously. But I take the music very, very serious. And DJing has always been my passion. And as much as creativity as I try to put in my production, as being a DJ back then, I tried to do the same thing. And like he said, thank you very much for it. And I don't like going bragging, like I was ahead of my time. But a lot of those records back then, I tried to prove that there was stuff that nobody was doing or stuff that could be invented or, I mean, the first single we did was called Just Say Stet, and I did some scratches, like, I was breaking down the syllables. I think it was James Brown's Funky. I went, funky, funky. You know, people weren't doing that back then. And I took pride in that. I was doing like, kind of like crazy scratches and stuff and kind of back and forth and chopping up with the fader. And people weren't really doing that. And that's why I took my pride. That's why I take most of my pride in is DJing. I love DJing. To this very day, I love DJing. And I invented the LL Cool J scratch, too. You could put that on film. That breaking up, LL Cool J is on. That was me, all right? That was me. That was my scratch. And anybody who was at that battle, when I battled Easy G, that's how I won. That's how I made it to semifinals. I work really hard, man, in what I do. And I really love what I do. And, you know, sometimes the money is great, but the credit lives forever.
Talking all that jazz, did you replay that Lonnie Liston Smith, The Expansions, on a keyboard?
Yeah, I had my friend Newkirk play that, and I actually produced that song, and I never got production credit because I had looped up the beats that's on there.
Next dramatic moment.
Yeah, and I had my friend Newkirk come in and play the keys, and seeing I was really young back then, I didn't know what production was. I had no idea what being a producer was. I didn't know what songwriting was. I didn't know. All I knew was, yo, I'm in the studio, I'm having fun, and that's how it came about. Until later in the years, I looked at the writer credit, and it just had Daddy-O's name. I was like, how did that happen? And he was getting all these big checks. I was like, how did that happen? You know, so I'm riding around my Pinto, and he's doing pretty good, man. Like, how did it, man?
You're talking about doing different things, and the De La Soul album, 3 Feet High and Rising, was, I guess, probably most people know it, but if you don't, it was full of pretty blatant but really well-used samples of a lot of different popular music. What was the fallout from that, like in a legal sense? Was it quite intense?
Well, let me kind of give you a little prehistory on that. When we did 3 Feet High and Rising, I made, even to this day, when I make records, I just make it strictly because I love the music. And sampling back then, we kind of grabbed from everywhere. But we were smart enough then to at least give all the samples and stuff to the label. We said, okay, this is everything that we're using. It was their decision to clear or not to clear certain things because, you know, we use a lot of obscure records as well. So they look at one record like George Clinton, Me, Myself, and I, Funkadelic. Okay, we're going to clear that, but we're not going to clear this because nobody knows this other record. We're going to clear this, but not clear that. So at the end of the day, even though that, you know, obviously everybody knows about the Turtles lawsuit, like the Turtles and blah, blah, blah.
Who are the Turtles in the first place? I think there's so many people who've heard about them first time through being sampled.
I don't know.
Did you ever get paid for that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, everything, like, because the record got popular, what happened was the label didn't know that the record was going to get that popular. I mean, Tommy Boy hasn't had a hit record at that time, since Planet Rock. And meanwhile, it's 1989. You know what I'm saying? So they, I guess they were like, oh, this is just like any other record. You know, I mean, not any other record, but, you know, yeah, we put out albums before. It's going to sell. I remember them saying, like, yeah, it'll probably sell like 100,000 copies, if that. You know what I'm saying? The record did a lot more than anybody expected. So that's when the lawsuits came in, and the label really wasn't prepared for it. I mean, but for me, despite the lawsuits, I mean, it was still enough for me to make a profit. It was enough for me to put a down payment on a house, which was nice. I bought my mom a house, which was nice. It was good enough for that, but at the particular time, the main focus was not money. It was just the quality of the music. So regardless of what we sampled or regardless of the lawsuits, it was the final outcome is what was more important. Because we didn't go in that record thinking like, wow, we're going to make this unique record, and we're going to sell all these units, and we're going to, you know, be rich beyond our wildest dreams. It was the fact that we stand for a certain thing, and that was to be yourself. And that was that whole album was about. It was not to rebel against all that gold and all the other things that were, I guess, kind of cliched as hip-hop back then. It was just like, this is where we come from, and this is our style. And that's the only thing we was trying to put across. And hopefully, yeah, we'll get a show or two out of it and, you know, maybe make $1 or two, but that was never the focus. It was always has been the music.
Speaking of the music, you'd been compared to being too close to the ultramagnetics at that time. How the hell did that happen?
Oh yeah, I remember when I first hooked up with Dayline, I was putting them together, and I asked Daddy O, who was actually the leader of Stetsasonic. He was the lead MC. I was like, hey, I got this group, you know, I'm putting together. I brought him to the studio, and I played him a rough demo. We did a song called Plug Tuning, which was our first single. And I remember Daddy O saying, I don't know, I can't work with them. He sound like the ultramagnetic MCs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with ultramagnetic, but he, you know, kind of shot me down. And that's one reason why I put De La Soul together, was because a lot of things I wanted to accomplish in Stetsasonic. I was just a DJ. I hate to say just a DJ, but that's how I was treated. It was like, you know, oh, he's just a DJ. You know, plus I was a lot younger than those guys. So a lot of times we'd go into the studio, and I'd say, hey, you know, I think this would be cool. Yeah, it's good. Oh, let's try this. I remember literally getting my hand slapped off the board. I go like, you know, it was, you know, and as a kid, I was probably like, what, 17, 18 at the time, you know, and you love music, you start to second guess yourself. You're like, well, maybe I am whack. Well, maybe the idea was stupid or whatever. So in order for me to kind of prove to myself that, or maybe prove to Daddy-O that he was right, I had to try those ideas. And maybe within that circle, I wasn't the star, but in my own neighborhood, I'm the only guy who made a record at the time. So to those guys, they looked up to me, which was good at the time, because it gave me an opportunity to tell them and kind of mold them and make them into what I wanted them to be. And the record did well. And so it just kind of proved to myself that dreams really do happen. You know, it's like, I mean, you know, that's the bottom line. It's just like, wow, those ideas weren't as stupid as I was told. You know, I went out and proved it, and you know, later on, you know, it got pretty crazy because I think there's little jealousies in the group and stuff, but it helped out a lot. And that's another reason, just to linger on that. I think that's another reason why, as time went on, me and De La Soul kind of separated, because a lot of those early records, like 3 Feet High and Rise and De La Soul Is Dead and Blue Mind State, was more so me, or kind of like my quirky sense of humor and personality, as opposed to what they wanted to represent. And they were kind of outgrowing that. And that's
so finally, they got rid of the abusive producer and
they got rid of Plug 4, man. And I didn't get rid of me. We had a nice, mature conversation in my house. And I figured we were starting to work on Stakes is High, which was like the 4th album. And we were just butting heads, you know, as far as like production styles. Like, I wanted to go out and kind of, you know, let's just have fun. I think at that point, since Blue Mind State didn't do as well as the previous records, they felt it was just a tense time for them to kind of have a good hit record. And I can't promise a hit record, because the first record we made wasn't intended to be a hit record. We just did it for fun, so I don't know how to make hit records. You know what I'm saying? I never knew how to make hit records. It's just something that kind of evolves. And so with that in mind, you know, during Stakes is High, I knew it was a good time. It's either we were going to like part on bad ways and not be friends, or you know what I'm saying, if we continue with the album, or I had to be man enough to kind of step back and say, okay, fine, you know, it's time for you to do your thing.
Takes a Nation of Millions was a unique recording and a new unique document of its time. So was 3 Feet High and Rising, and I mean, it came at a time when technology got to the point that you could actually do a lot of stuff and flip things around. And yeah, apart from one or two lawyers, they didn't really know what was really going on. But can you tell us a little bit about the actual production process of like how you guys got together, how you were searching for samples, how you were layering them and all these kind of things?
I think a lot of what made that record, I guess, cool in my eyes was the fact that, exactly what you said, we layered stuff, and people weren't really into layering samples. It was usually like one main loop, maybe some scratches. Our whole thing is, like, when we produced that album is like, wow, those horns are so cool. Wow, that bass line is so cool. And I think what made us different in the way we produce stuff is we used pitch shifting, and people weren't really doing that back then. Like, we put our music in key. So we made them fit. So, for example, if we heard a horn, but it didn't fit with a certain bass line, we'd shift it until it fit with the bass line. And that enabled us to layer a whole lot of different sounds on top of each other and make it sound like it belonged together. And that's what I think kind of gave us a little edge. And it wasn't even like, I didn't really know too much about the equipment or anything. It was just us asking questions. I think that's the best thing in production is when you're doing something, you say, wow, is there any way that I can make this go backwards and then kind of, but the snare go forwards, but everything else go backwards. And when you constantly ask yourself questions, you start to find out the answers to those questions. And that, I think, enables greater production, because once you answer those things and you kind of get it done, usually a lot of people, what they do is like, oh, that's impossible, it'll never happen, it'll never whatever. But to actually go forward and kind of answer those things, especially technology things, it can make your production way, I think, far more advanced than most people. And that's what we did on that album, was just like, can we change stuff so the key's right and blah, blah, blah. And then actually to research it, ask a few engineers, you know, and then they make a pitch shifter. We didn't know that. Or filtering, like filtering was new back then. And that was the same thing. Can we take out all the highs and just have the bass? And, you know, and in addition to what you were saying, a lot of what we did on that album was we did bring a lot of different records together. It was a competition almost. Like DJing and hip hop is competitive anyway. So I would bring in a record and go, okay, we're gonna loop that up. Paz will come in, yeah, but what about this? Then Dave Trugoy would come in, yeah, but I think this would be good. Then Mace go, that's all right, but how about this? All right, let's put them all together. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I think the record came out really, really, I guess, different as far as production. And our influences were different, you know. It's like, for example, you know, people, when we talk about earlier about digging for records and stuff, people were digging from the same places. James Brown, obviously he has funky stuff. Anybody on a cover with some afros and a band, when you see an album cover, oh, that has to be funky. You know, when I grew up, like, I'm a 70s child, so in the 70s, radio played everything, from Hall & Oates, Say No Go, for example. Hall & Oates, they played Disco Duck, they played James Brown, there was a wide variety of music being played, so we're exposed to a lot more. And so we grabbed from those different places, you know. They play, I don't know, anything, almost anything and everything that was good. And also me listening to Africa Bambaataa, I think helped a whole lot, because when I first started DJing, Bambaataa was that DJ, you know, technically Bambaataa was never a great DJ, as far as like, you know, but his records were incredible, because he'd play anything from a Mickey Mouse record to, I don't know, Leonard Skinner to, you know, anything that was popular, to a James Brown record, and that it was just a wide variety. So we kind of grabbed from a whole bunch of different places, and our influences were a lot different, you know.
I mean, when you switch on MTV these days and you see some person from the UK with doing like a cover version of quite a popular Hall & Oates song, which you've sampled, I mean, has the whole thing come full circle? Because I'm pretty confident they've heard it first, rather in the sample than in the...
Yeah, I mean,
it's even more blatant than just using the original Say No Go loop or something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people say, okay, I always get a lot of these sampling questions as far as like, I always get the finger pointed, well, sampling isn't creative, couldn't you play a lot of stuff over, and blah, 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 blah. But I come from a DJ era, and DJs, we play records. So the sound that we liked was on the record, so we sampled it. You know, I think us as the producers and as the artists were never at fault for sampling. If it was so unlawful and so, like, Forsaken, the label should have said no, and the lawyers should have said no. But everybody seen money coming in. That's why it wasn't stopped. So the finger that gets pointed is always the artist. Well, you did this. Well, we don't know any different. You know what I'm saying? That's where we come from. I play big beat, so I'm a sample big beat. I play Impeach the President, I'm a sample Impeach the President. You know, a lot of us don't play instruments, but as far as hip hop's concerned, it's based on these two turntables, and that's it, and a microphone. So, I mean, you know, if anybody's to blame, blame those who put out those records and those in power. You know, say, oh, you let those guys get away, you know, they don't want to put the record out, and people don't realize that. So I get a lot of flack, well, you sampled it. Well, you know, I didn't make the bulk of the money, the label did.